The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. Chapter 11. On my next visit to the library in Amsterdam, I found that Mr. Bennett had actually looked some things up for me during my absence. When I went into the reading room straight from school, my book bag still on my back, he glanced up with a smile. "So it's you," he said in his nice English. "My young historian, I have something for you for your project." I followed him to his desk and he took out a book. "This is not such an old book," he told me, "but there's some very old stories in it. They are not very happy reading, my dear, but maybe they'll help you write your paper." Mr. Bennett settled me at a table, and I looked gratefully at his retreating sweater. It touched me to be trusted with something terrible. The book was called Tales from the Carpathians, a dingy 19th century tome published privately by an English collector named Robert Digby. Digby's preface outlined his wanderings among wild mountains and wilder languages, although he had also gone to German and Russian sources for some of his work. His tales had a wild sound too, and their prose was romantic enough, but examining them long afterward, I found his versions of them compared favorably to those of later collectors and translators. There were 2 tales about Prince Dracula, and I read them eagerly. The first recounted how Dracula liked to feast out of doors among the corpses of his impaled subjects. One day, I learned, a servant complained openly in front of Dracula about the terrible smell, whereupon the prince ordered his men to impale the servant above the others, so the smell would not offend the dying servant's nose. Digby presented another version of this, in which Dracula shouted for a stake 3 times the length of the stakes on which the others had been impaled. The second story was equally gruesome. It described how Sultan Mehmed II had once sent 2 ambassadors to Dracula. When the ambassadors came before him, they did not remove their turbans. Dracula demanded to know why they were dishonoring him in this way, and they replied that they were simply acting in accordance with their own customs. "Then I shall help you to strengthen your customs," replied the prince, and he had their turbans nailed to their heads. I copied Digby's versions of these 2 little tales into my notebook. When Mr. Bennett came back to see how I was getting along, I asked him if we might look for some sources on Dracula by his contemporaries, if there were any. "Certainly," he said, nodding gravely. He was going off his desk then, but he would look around for something as soon as he had time. "Perhaps after that," he shook his head, smiling, "perhaps after that I would find some pleasanter topic, such as medieval architecture." I promised, smiling too, that I would think about it. There is no place on earth more exuberant than Venice on a breezy, hot, cloudless day. The boats rock and swell in the lagoon, as if launching themselves crewless on adventure. The ornate facades brighten in the sunlight. The water smells fresh for once. The whole city puffs up like a sail, a boat dancing unmoored, ready to float off. The waves at the edge of the Piazza di San Marco become raucous in the wake of the speedboats, producing a festive but vulgar music like a clash of cymbals. In Amsterdam, Venice of the North, this jubilant weather would have made the city sparkle with renewed purpose. Here, it ended by showing cracks in the perfection. A weedy fountain in one back square, for example, whose water should have been on full spray, and instead made a rusty dribble over the lip of the basin. St. Mark's horses pranced shabbily in the glittering light. The columns of the Doge's palace looked disagreeably unwashed. I commented on this air of dilapidated celebration, and my father laughed. "You've got an eye for atmosphere," he said. "Venice is famous for her stage show. She doesn't mind if she gets a little run down, as long as the world pours in here to worship her." He gestured around the outdoor cafe, our favorite place after Florian's, at the perspiring tourists, their hats and pastel shirts flapping in the breeze of the water. "Wait till evening and you won't be disappointed. A stage set needs a softer kind of light than this. You'll be surprised by the transformation." For now, sipping my orangeade, I was too comfortable to move anyway. Waiting for a pleasant surprise suited my aims exactly.